There's a moment we've all experienced. Someone says something, does something, crosses a line, and instantly you feel it in your body, a knot in your stomach, a tightening in your chest, that instinctive signal saying, this isn't right. Yet, instead of speaking up, instead of addressing it, you choose silence. That silence might feel safe in the moment. It feels like you're avoiding conflict, protecting peace, keeping the room calm. But what actually happens is that silence teaches others how to treat you. When they cross the line and you say nothing, it doesn't just go unnoticed. It becomes permission. The problem with silence is that it doesn't communicate neutrality. It communicates acceptance. People rarely interpret your quiet as resistance. They interpret it as agreement. And slowly, the boundaries you thought you would begin to erode, not because they've disappeared, but because you've stopped enforcing them. Think about the first time someone made a joke at your expense. Maybe it stung, but you laughed it off. The second time, it was easier for them. By the third or fourth, it became a pattern. What started as a single moment of discomfort becomes the new normal, all because silence created the space for it to grow. When you remain silent, you also start to train yourself. You begin to normalize disrespect. Your mind starts telling you, maybe it's not that bad, maybe I'm overreacting, and slowly you lower the standard of how you believe you deserve to be treated. That's not protecting peace. That's abandoning yourself. There's another cost to silence resentment. Every time you bite your tongue, you store that frustration. And while you may never express it outwardly, it builds inwardly. Resentment grows into heaviness, into stress, into a quiet bitterness that doesn't just affect your relationships with others, but your relationship with yourself. Silence, in this sense, is not just about avoiding discomfort. It's about avoiding responsibility, because the responsibility of honoring your boundaries falls to you. Others can't respect a line they don't know exists. If you won't voice it, you can't expect them to guess it. And the truth is, every moment you remain silent in the face of disrespect, you're making a choice. Not a choice to keep the peace, but a choice to teach people that their behavior is acceptable, even when it's not. There's a subtle habit many of us fall into without realizing it. We over-explain. We make a choice, and instead of letting that choice stand, we rush to justify it. We pile on reasons, we defend ourselves. We try to make it sound acceptable to everyone else. It feels harmless, but it's actually a quiet signal that we're not fully confident in our own decisions. When you constantly justify yourself, what you're really doing is asking for permission. You're saying, here's what I decided, but let me prove to you it's okay. Let me convince you I'm allowed to choose this. And in that moment, you hand over your authority. You shift the power of your choice from yourself to someone else's approval. The need to justify often comes from fear of being judged, fear of disappointing others, fear of being misunderstood. So we think if we explain enough, if we give enough reasons, then maybe no one can criticize us. But the truth is, people who want to criticize will find a way, no matter how detailed your explanation is. Think about how many times you've said no to something, but immediately followed it with a long explanation. I can't make it because of work, because I'm tired, because I already promised someone else. As if no, by itself, isn't valid enough. But no is a complete sentence. It doesn't need a defense, it needs clarity. Over time, justifying erodes your self-trust. You start to believe that your choices aren't valid unless they can be backed by a long list of acceptable reasons. You stop trusting your instincts. And when you don't trust your instincts, you lose touch with that inner compass that tells you what's right for you. There's also an exhaustion that comes with constant justifying. It's draining to always defend yourself. It takes energy that could be spent on moving forward, on creating, on living. Yet it gets wasted on rehearsing explanations for people who may not even care. That energy loss chips away at your confidence. Another hidden danger is that justifying invites debate. The more reasons you give, the more material others have to challenge. Why can't you rearrange your schedule? Why don't you try harder? Why not just say yes? By explaining too much, you open the door for people to push back on your choices instead of accepting them. At its core, the habit of over-explaining isn't about clarity, it's about insecurity. It's the subtle belief that your decisions aren't strong enough on their own, that they require external validation to hold weight. And once that belief takes root, it becomes harder and harder to stand firm in who you are and what you choose. There's a word many of us use far more often than we realize: sorry. It slips out in casual conversations, in professional settings, even in moments where no apology is needed. Someone bumps into us, and we're the one who says sorry. We take up space in a meeting and we preface our opinion with sorry. Over time, it stops being a genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing and starts becoming a reflex. The danger of apologizing too much is subtle but powerful. Every unnecessary sorry chips away at the weight of the word itself. An apology should signal accountability and respect. But when it becomes your default response, it loses its meaning. It's no longer about taking ownership. It becomes about shrinking yourself. What's really happening when you over-apologize is that you're lowering your own value in the conversation. You're signaling to others, my presence is inconvenient, my voice is disruptive, my needs are secondary. That message doesn't just stay with you. It gets absorbed by the people around you. Think about the impact in a workplace. A leader who apologizes for speaking up doesn't come across as considerate. They come across as unsure. A colleague who says sorry before sharing an idea doesn't sound collaborative. They sound like they're asking for permission. What begins as politeness quickly transforms into self-diminishment. The habit often comes from a good place. We want to be kind. We want to avoid conflict. We want to make sure people feel comfortable. But kindness is not the same as constant apology. You can be considerate without lowering yourself. You can be respectful without making yourself smaller. There's also a psychological cost. Every time you say sorry unnecessarily, you reinforce the belief that you're at fault, even when you're not. Over time, you carry a sense of guilt for simply existing, for taking up space, for having needs. That guilt becomes a lens through which you view every interaction. On the other side, people start to treat your apologies as background noise. When you apologize for everything, your sorry no longer holds weight when it's truly needed. It blurs the line between a reflex and responsibility. And when accountability is actually required, your words won't carry the strength they should. At its root, apologizing too much is not about politeness. It's about self-permission. It's about whether you believe you're allowed to speak, to act, to exist without justification. And when sorry becomes the price you pay for showing up, it's not just language you're giving away, it's your sense of worth. Every promise made carries weight. It's not just words, it's trust, expectation, and respect wrapped together. When someone makes a commitment to you, they're not only agreeing to a task or a deadline, they're acknowledging that your time and your needs matter. And when that promise is broken, the weight doesn't just disappear, it shifts. It shifts onto you. The first time a promise is broken, you feel it. There's frustration, maybe disappointment. But often, instead of addressing it, you brush it aside. You tell yourself it's fine, it's not a big deal. You choose tolerance over confrontation. And in that silence, you've communicated something you didn't intend, that your time and expectations can be ignored without consequence. When you let broken promises slide repeatedly, a pattern forms. What started as an exception becomes the rule. People learn that commitments to you don't carry the same urgency as commitments to others. They learn that rescheduling with you is easy, that canceling on you has no cost, that failing to follow through won't be questioned. The impact is bigger than inconvenience. It's about value. Time is one of the few things we can't get back. When you accept broken promises without consequence, you're signaling that your time is less important than theirs. And the more you signal that, the more others begin to believe it, consciously or not. There's also a ripple effect. Broken promises, when unchallenged, erode trust. And without trust, relationships, whether personal or professional, start to weaken. You begin to hesitate before relying on others. You second-guess commitments. And slowly, you stop expecting follow-through at all, which is a quiet form of giving up. At the same time, something shifts within you. Every time you excuse a broken promise, you teach yourself that your boundaries aren't worth enforcing. That lesson, repeated enough times, begins to change the way you see yourself. Instead of demanding respect, you settle for tolerance. Instead of requiring accountability, you carry the burden. It's important to recognize that consequences don't always mean punishment. Consequences can simply mean recalibration, adjusting your expectations, limiting your availability, or choosing not to depend on someone who has shown you they won't follow through. It's about protecting your energy, not punishing theirs. Because in the end, every broken promise left unaddressed isn't just about them. It's about you. It's about whether you're willing to let others treat your time as optional, or whether you'll stand in the quiet authority of someone who knows their time has value. There's a kind of disrespect that doesn't come in shouting or obvious rudeness. It hides behind humor. Someone makes a comment about you, your choices, your appearance, your abilities, and when it stings, they cover it with a smile. Relax, it's just a joke. And in that moment, you feel trapped between discomfort and the pressure to laugh along. Laughing it off feels easier. It diffuses the tension, it avoids conflict, it signals to the room that you're not bothered. But beneath that smile, you are bothered. And by choosing to laugh, you're not just covering your own discomfort. You're teaching the other person that their words are acceptable. The problem with insults disguised as jokes is that they thrive on plausible deniability. If you react, they can claim you're too sensitive. If you stay quiet, they've won permission to keep going. And the cycle repeats with each joke, cutting a little deeper and each forced laugh reinforcing their behavior. Think about how many times you've walked away from a conversation replaying the comment in your head. The room might have moved on, but you're still carrying it. That's the weight of unspoken disrespect. It doesn't disappear when the joke ends, it lingers in silence long after the laughter fades. When you laugh at disrespect, you send a message not just to the person who made the comment, but to everyone watching. You communicate that you're willing to tolerate being the punchline. And in group dynamics, that matters. Others take cues from how you allow yourself to be treated. Over time, this kind of tolerance erodes confidence. You start to question whether you even deserve to speak up. You wonder if maybe they're right, if maybe the joke really is harmless. But humor doesn't erase the truth, it only disguises it. And repeated long enough, disguised insults become part of your reality. The tricky part is that calling it out feels uncomfortable. It risks tension. It risks being labeled as humorless. But boundaries are rarely comfortable to enforce. They require you to choose discomfort in the short term to prevent disrespect in the long term. Because every time you laugh off an insult, you're not just protecting their comfort, you're sacrificing your own dignity. And while humor may soften the blow for them, it sharpens the cost for you. Relationships are meant to be built on balance. Not perfect balance, because life is rarely even, but a rhythm where both people give, both people show up, both people take responsibility. But when that balance disappears, when one person is always the giver and the other is always the receiver, the relationship stops being a partnership and starts being a burden. Carrying the entire weight of a relationship looks like being the one who always reaches out first, who always plans, who always fixes misunderstandings. It looks like being the one who remembers birthdays, checks in when things feel distant, or bends your schedule to make things work. At first, it might feel like love or dedication. Over time, it begins to feel like work. The hidden cost is emotional exhaustion. When you're constantly pouring out without being refilled, your energy drains. You might not notice it immediately, but eventually you feel it. The resentment creeping in, the fatigue of always carrying what was meant to be shared. There's also a danger in the message you send. When you accept one-sided effort, you signal that this imbalance is enough for you. You train others to give less because you've shown them you'll pick up the slack. What starts as generosity quietly becomes enabling. Think about the dynamic it creates. The other person never has to stretch, never has to be uncomfortable, never has to risk rejection, because you've already done the work for them. In protecting the relationship, you remove their responsibility to invest in it. And in doing so, you protect the bond at the expense of yourself. The weight of that responsibility often shows up as guilt. You feel guilty for pulling back, guilty for saying no, guilty for expecting more. But guilt in this context isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you've been conditioned to believe that love means overextending yourself. The truth is, relationships built on one-sided effort don't collapse suddenly. They wear down slowly. They erode your trust, your patience, and your sense of worth. They teach you that showing up for others is more important than being shown up for yourself. And the most damaging part is that you begin to forget what mutual care feels like. You convince yourself that imbalance is normal, that exhaustion is just part of connection. But deep down, you know that carrying the entire weight was never meant to be the definition of love. There's a phrase many of us use too often. It's fine. We say it when someone cancels on us, when someone interrupts us, when someone oversteps a boundary. The words are simple, but the cost is heavy. Because every time you say it's fine when it's not, you teach yourself that your needs are negotiable, that your boundaries are flexible, that your feelings are less important. Minimizing your needs often comes from wanting to keep the peace. You don't want to seem difficult, demanding, or needy. So you downplay what you feel. You convince yourself that speaking up will only make things worse. That swallowing the discomfort is easier than risking conflict. But peace that comes at the cost of your own voice isn't really peace, it's silence. The danger is that over time you begin to believe the minimization. You tell yourself, maybe it's not such a big deal. Maybe I am overreacting. You blur the line between what truly hurts and what you've conditioned yourself to tolerate. And in that blurring, you lose clarity about what you actually need. Think about the message this sends to others. If every boundary you express is quickly withdrawn with, it's fine, people learn not to take your boundaries seriously. They don't mean harm, but they adapt to the standard you set. If you consistently show that your needs can be overlooked, others will consistently overlook them. There's also a quiet resentment that builds when your needs are minimized. Even if you never say it out loud, you feel it. The frustration of being unheard, the exhaustion of pretending, the heaviness of always giving in. And that resentment doesn't just affect the relationship, it affects the way you see yourself. Because minimizing your needs isn't just about others ignoring you, it's about you ignoring you. It's about abandoning your own voice in the moments when it matters most. And when you abandon yourself repeatedly, you slowly start to erode your own sense of worth. The hardest part is that the habit feels selfless. You tell yourself you're being kind, flexible, accommodating. But true kindness doesn't require you to erase yourself. Boundaries don't make you less loving, they make your love sustainable. Without them, love becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice without balance becomes depletion. Minimizing your needs might protect others from discomfort, but it leaves you carrying the cost. And when that cost piles up, it shows up in your energy, your confidence, and your ability to feel genuinely connected. Because connection cannot thrive when one person is always disappearing for the sake of harmony. Kindness is one of the most powerful human qualities. It builds trust, it softens conflict, it creates connection. But somewhere along the way, many of us confuse kindness with tolerance. We start to believe that being kind means accepting anything, any behavior, any words, any treatment, even when it chips away at our dignity. The truth is, kindness and tolerance are not the same thing. Kindness is a choice you make from a place of strength. It's extending respect, patience, or compassion because you want to, not because you're afraid of the alternative. Tolerance, on the other hand, often comes from fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of rejection, fear of being seen as unkind. When you confuse the two, you end up allowing disrespect under the disguise of generosity. You let someone speak to you in ways that hurt. You let someone take more than they give. You let someone cross your boundaries repeatedly, and you call it kindness. But in reality, it's not kindness, it's avoidance. Think about how this shows up in relationships. You excuse behaviors that should never be excused. You rationalize actions that should be questioned. You lower your standards in the name of compassion. And slowly, the kindness that was supposed to uplift you becomes the very thing that diminishes you. The cost of this confusion is not just external, it's internal. Every time you accept something that goes against your values, you create a quiet split inside yourself. One part of you wants to honor your boundaries, the other part silences it in the name of being nice. That split creates guilt, frustration, and eventually resentment. And here's the irony: true kindness can't exist without boundaries. Because when you remove dignity from the equation, what you're offering isn't really kindness, it's compliance. And compliance is not a gift to others, it's a sacrifice of yourself. The most authentic acts of kindness come from people who know where they stand, who can say no, with clarity and yes, with integrity, who understand that kindness is not about pleasing everyone, but about treating people with respect while also respecting themselves. When you confuse kindness with tolerance, you may protect someone else's comfort, but you lose your own. And when kindness consistently costs you your dignity, it's no longer kindness at all. It's self-betrayal dressed in politeness.